Good morning, happy Tuesday, and welcome to Connection. We are in the month of exploring our inner kingdom in our devotion, and today is a part 1, which we will get the part 2 of tomorrow evening when my brother does the online session of Gospel of Inclusion. But today is Happy in My Own Clothes, part 1. So first, let's say our prayer of surrender. Spirit of truth, carry me where you will. Bring to me what you will. Take from me what you will. Awaken in me what you will. The Christ man is around me. The Christ mind is in me. The Christ power flows through me. And the Christ mystery exists as me. I believe it. I perceive it. And now I receive it. I am surrendered. Amen. And so it is. So here's our affirmation. Today, I will celebrate my uniqueness. I am an individual, and God created me and works through me in her own way. I can respect how others connect to God and create their lives while honoring my own. All right, so it says all of us have borrowed a friend's clothes before. Most of us have also been the recipient of a hand-me-down item from an older sibling or cousin. If we are lucky, these clothes fit us. If we are truly blessed, the clothes are still in fashion. However, there is a greater joy when the clothes you wear are your own clothes, picked by you and specifically for you. How do clothes apply to our daily lives? In the Old Testament, we find the story of David preparing to fight Goliath. Part of David's preparation was to receive some of Saul's, at that time, the current king of Israel, armor and weaponry. David tried on all sorts of protective armor and tried out Saul's weaponry. None of it was the right size, and none of it suited David's style. David was accustomed to using his slingshot. When he told Saul that he would not wear his clothes, Saul questioned him about this decision. To paraphrase David's answer, he replied, "God does not work with me like this. I cannot wear your clothes." Are you wearing someone else's clothes? Approaching life through another's methodology? Borrowing a friend's definition of success and happiness? Allow me to encourage you to return all borrowed clothes. Be you. God made you unique and uses you in your own beautiful skin. All right, so here is our ending prayer. Unique God, there is none like you and none like me. Give me the courage to wear my own clothes, connect to you in my own way, and to be authentically me. Amen. All right, amen. Good stuff. But that's not what we're going to be talking about today. Many times, the theme of the devotion and the theme of the teaching will just mesh together beautifully, and that's usually totally unplanned, but not today. That's not what we're going to be talking about, but that was good stuff anyway. I love it, right? Today, we're going to be discussing the fact that everything is energy. Everything. But first, we're going to repeat our connection affirmation together. I allow perfect health in my body, perfect peace in my mind, perfect unconditional love in my heart, and the perfect divine timing of spirit to guide my life in thought, word, and deed. Amen. And so it is. All right. So we're going to begin with a quote, which is, everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. This is not philosophy. This is physics. And that was said by none other than Albert Einstein. So we say that sentence a lot. We use that phrase a lot, that everything is energy. But what does it really mean? And more importantly, what impact does it have on our individual lives? When some people hear that quote or that phrase, everything is energy, they tend to dismiss it immediately because they think, oh, that's just some airy-fairy, woo-woo spiritual jargon that doesn't have any real-world implications. So I think it's important to note, for the sake of those people, that Albert Einstein, who is regarded as one of the most gifted scientists of the 20th century, added to that statement at the very end. He's the one who said, this is not philosophy, this is physics. So, and what he said, let me remind you, was that everything is energy, and that's all there is to it. Match the frequency of the reality you want, and you cannot help but get that reality. It can be no other way. So, in essence, he was going ahead and giving an answer to all those people who would discount what he was saying on the grounds that they saw this as just a philosophy and not real science. I'm not sure how much more real you can get in the world of science than Albert Einstein. So what he's talking about here, and what we'll talk about today, isn't just some idea somebody had because they wanted to sound spiritual. This is all based in actual science. It's what has become known as quantum physics. So here's another quote. The universe responds to your frequency. It doesn't recognize your personal desires, wants, or needs. It only understands the frequency in which or at which you are vibrating. So, if you are vibrating in the frequency of fear, guilt, or shame, you will attract things and people who are in a similar vibration. If you are vibrating in the frequency of love, joy, and abundance, you will attract things and people who are in and support that frequency. It's exactly like a radio station. You have to be tuned in to the kind of music you want to listen to. You have to be tuned into the energy you want to manifest, and it will change your life. End quote. And I don't know who to attribute that to, but it was wonderful. So, okay, some people will be disheartened and discouraged by that because all they hear is, God doesn't care about my needs, wants, and desires. Okay, when it says at the beginning, the universe responds to your frequency, it doesn't recognize your personal desires, wants, or needs. Well, that's because we have sometimes created a God that is in our image. So we see a person, a grandfatherly-like figure who really cares about which, I don't know, the verdict's still out on what God is, who God is. But let me go ahead and explain why that quote is not as discouraging as it might sound on the surface. All right? Because some people hear, oh, well, if that's the truth, then God doesn't show his love for me by actions or by giving me things. But when you really listen to it, that you realize that that's a pretty immature level to be living on, and because it implies that you are being a bit of a victim because you believe you are at the mercy of a God who can decide to give you things based on whether or not he thinks you're worthy of the thing, or based on your behavior. So a more mature ear hears in that quote, hey, the power is actually within me. God is love, okay, as my brother always says, and the love that he is always available to me. So God doesn't love you as an action. God just is love. There's no way he can do anything but be love and love you. But it's not like human love, like we think, that can be withheld. You know, in our opening statement that we say on the first Sunday of every month when we light the candles, that's one of the things it says. Genuine, unconditional love is when nothing is withheld. It's not a person up there like a human saying, I'm going to love you if you behave this way, and I'm not going to love you if you behave in a way that I don't like. That's not what God's unconditional love is. So God is love, And the love that he is available to me, to us. All we have to do is get ourselves into the frequency of love. Or we could also refer to it as the frequency of God, because they are one and the same. God equals love. So in this scenario, all the power is actually in your hands. You're not waiting on God to bestow anything upon you. You can have all the love he has to offer, or that he is, just by sending out the frequency of that love. Because as Einstein says, that's physics. What you send out, what frequency you send out, that's the frequency that it hits and returns back to you. And that is a universal law. So that's actually a pretty comforting quote if you just open up your mind a little, if you're listening with a mature spiritual ear and not your ego's small-minded, immature ear. Okay, moving on. I came across a piece recently that confirms what this quote is saying and says what I was just saying in a little different way. And it goes further by giving a really good illustration that I think will help give us a physical picture we can relate to when we're comparing things according to different levels of maturity or enlightenment, whatever you want to call it. Like what I said a minute ago, on an immature level, you hear a statement like, God doesn't love you, and you stop listening right there and shut down in a panic rather than continue listening to the rest of the thought, which is that the subtext of that statement is God doesn't love as an action because, as I said, God is love. God is the frequency of love. And that frequency that he, she, it is always available to us. Love isn't something that is given. It's a frequency. It just is, like the sun. And it's within our power to get on or to tune into that frequency or not. It's like the sun. When the sun is shining, it's not like the sun decides who to shine on and who not to shine on. The sun just shines. Now, you can go out and get in the sun, or you can stand in the shade, or you can go inside, or you can get under an umbrella. But the sun is always there. God, the frequency of God's love is always available. It's not something you have to work for or be special in order to receive. It just is, and it is within our power to either get in the frequency or remove ourselves from the frequency. So understood on this level, we are not at the mercy of any external being who can decide whether to love us or not. The power isn't outside of us. It is up to us to decide whether or not we want to match the frequency of love. So it's not a depressing quote from that perspective. Here's the piece I want to share with you from a guy named Aaron Abke, who's being interviewed by our friend Kyle Cease, who I've quoted to you many times before. Interestingly, this guy, Aaron, is a former worship leader, and I believe his father was a pastor, and he has left the church and moved beyond Christianity in search of a bigger version of God and spirituality, much like many of us have. So he's talking here about people being bummed out when they hear we're all one and that no one is separate from anyone else, because they think that means that they're no longer special to God. They're no longer God's little teacher's pet because they've, done the right thing or said the right prayer or follow the correct religion. But it's really just a matter of seeing things from a different level of maturity. He says, when we talk about the non-duality of a person, and that all of us are actually one with each other and with God, what the ego hears is an extremely depressing message, because all it hears is the loss or perceived loss of control, which is the ego's worst nightmare. In other words, what the ego hears is, if I'm no longer an individual, then I no longer have control over my separate individual life. But he says, the message isn't that you had control or were in control at one time, that you were really a separate self, but now that you've heard the message of enlightenment, you are no longer separate and have now lost control. That's not the message, which is what the immature ear hears. The message is that you were never separate from God or your fellow man in the first place. that's always been an illusion or delusion. But still, even though you've never been able to control situations and circumstances, look at all the things that have happened through you, through your connectedness to Source. So this message is actually the most expansive message ever. You've been playing small, following your ego and believing your ego self is who you are. So here's the visual that he gives. It's like you have this one penny in your hand and you're holding on to it for dear life because that's all you think you have. When there's a stack of $20 billion sitting in a pile behind you, and all you have to do is turn around and see it. And when you do that, you'll understand how little value the penny, which represents your ego self, actually has, and you won't be so afraid to let it go. What could be more liberating than realizing you are the entire universe in ecstatic motion? Okay, so I love that illustration that he gives there. When we are viewing ourselves through the lens of our ego, which is small, we're identifying with a form, with our physical form, as well as the form of our mind and our intellect. This is the part of us who thinks that we have the ability to keep it all together, that if we work really hard, we can get where we want to go through our effort or our discipline or whatever other temporary modality we're depending on and have allowed ourselves to become attached to. That part of us thinks that we can figure everything out if we just have enough information and correctly apply our logic and reasoning to it. But that is all just identifying with various forms and leaves no room for what we're talking about today, energy, which is what we all are and what everything else is as well. Energy is not a form. It is what is contained within a form. Years ago in a sermon, my brother described it as being like water. He talked about water being able to take on 3 different forms. The one we actually refer to as water is its liquid form, but it can also be solid when it freezes into ice or steam when it gets very, very hot. But it's all still water. And then in the middle of his sermon, he took a drink to illustrate that the same water that was just contained in his water bottle was now contained within his body, but it's still the same water. The point being, spirit is just like that. Spirit is and can be contained within many different forms, but it is not the form itself. And then he talked a bit about the danger of allowing ourselves to get attached to forms and mistake that for spirit. I'm going to read a little of what he said and then expand on it. He says, spirit can be housed in Christianity. Spirit, truth, connection to God can be housed in Islam. It can be housed in Hinduism, Judaism, Buddhism. It can be housed in yoga. It can be housed in nature. It can be housed in anything because it is above our definitions and forms. Okay, and then he gave the example of the biblical story of the woman who, back as the custom was in those days, she had married a man and he died, so her brother was obligated to marry her and take her on. And then she apparently went through 7 of the brothers who all died. And so the Pharisees were asking him, Jesus, whose wife will she be in heaven? And Jesus answered, you are projecting the spiritual world, which contains no form, things and concepts that belong to this material world. You are trying to put that form, thought, identity into the same category as spiritual essence. And those 2 things are not compatible. He said she's not going to be anybody's wife in heaven because marriage doesn't even exist there. In the spiritual realm, there is no container that is called marriage as there is down here on earth. He went on to say, whatever you set yourself up as or see yourself as, whatever form you identify with in this temporary world will end when your physical form dies in this temporary world. No labels or identities get carried with your spirit when it exits this fleshly tent. When your tent dies, when you trade in this temporary living space, you go back to being pure spirit, also known as energy, which we always are. It's just temporarily housed in a body. So my question today is, why not just identify with that now then? Okay, why instead of and there's a place to identify with human temporary forms, but there's also a place, that's that duality that we have to always hold of our humanity and our divinity. There's also a time to just go ahead and identify with your eternal energy self. That way, it's not such a crashing blow when your physical tent form dies, passes away. So we'll talk in just a few minutes about how the entire concept of time is a part of this worldly, earthly, temporary existence, and how when you stop identifying with it, with time, your whole world changes. But right now, I want to remind you of one of my favorite quotes by Andrew Martin. He says, "The only claim the divine ever makes is I am. And so anything we add after that is a lie." Now, that's a really strong way to put it. That word lie carries a very negative connotation. So how about this? Anything we put after the words I am is just a temporary label, an earthly form that we can put on or take off whenever we want to. But it is not who we are at our core. At our core, we are just the I am, and that's all. So the reason I went through all of that explanation was to lay a foundation that differentiates this world of form from the energy that we are. Our bodies, all of our labels, and as we're about to talk about, time itself are just containers of the energy that is us. And once we understand that difference, as I said, our whole world changes because our perception of who we are changes. Time is an earthly container, and when we try to apply spiritual principles and concepts or to somehow fit them into time, which is an earthly concept, that's when we get into trouble. That's when we start believing things like that we have to wait on God to decide when He's going to bless us. We have to wait on our season of favor rather than knowing that wherever we stand, in whatever time, that is where God is. So there is literally no waiting on God. You're just waiting on yourself once you realize. I remember the first time I heard my brother say that, it was so powerful. He said, "Wherever I put my foot is holy ground." It's not that I go to this place that was dubbed or labeled holy ground a long time ago because Jesus walked there or whatever. No, wherever I put my foot, whether it's in Atlanta, Georgia, whether it's in Jerusalem, whether it's in Switzerland, whether it's in Norway, whether it's in New York, that is holy ground because my energy is what is holy, and that is what makes the ground I am on, wherever it is, whatever time it is, holy. All right, so that's how it works when you realize that you yourself are pure energy, the pure energy of the I am, and therefore you're not waiting on anything, and you don't have to be in any certain place because time and space are both just earthly containers. Spirit transcends them both, and it is the energy or spirit within you that determines what frequency you're on. All possible outcomes, this is quantum physics now, all possible outcomes to every situation already exist. It's not like we're walking down the road and making this particular turn and then that particular turn until we finally arrive at our destination. And if we don't make the right turns at the right time, we'll miss it. Or things will turn out differently because we made a mistake or took a wrong turn. That is the view we have from an earthly perspective, that if you don't get everything just right and you miss it, then your opportunity is gone. That's not how it works in the spirit realm. Every outcome is always there. They're just on different frequencies. The way we choose our preferred outcome or destination is to match that frequency. So time is time in the linear sense, where you have to do this and then wait and then travel this specific distance and make this turn and then wait some more, doesn't exist in the world of energy and frequency and spirit. I'm going to read to you now a short piece by Michael Beckwith, and in it he talks about walking towards something. But if you hear what he's saying with the immature ears of your ego, it will have an entirely different meaning than what he's saying. So remember that today we're talking about the fact that everything is energy. And when you're looking at it and listening to it from that perspective, you're not dealing with the forms of time or space. I'm going to try to explain this further as I read it. He says, we have to understand that fear is an energy, and as such, it can never be destroyed once created, but it can be transmuted. You do this by changing or choosing the frequency of it. For example, fear can become excitement, and excitement can become enthusiasm. I never tell people to get rid of their fear. It can't be done as long as we remain in this human realm. But in order to transmute the energy and frequency of the fear, you first must admit it's there. Okay, I'm afraid, but I'm going to walk in the direction of my good, of something better. If you continue to walk towards something better, that begins the process of transmutation. All right, so that's what he said. Let's break this down a little. When he uses the phrase, walk in the direction of, if you're thinking down here in terms of forms and time and space and duality, earthly realm, then that means there is a possibility that's when that possibility comes in that you're going to get it wrong or choose the wrong direction, make the wrong turn, or it might take too long and you miss your opportunity, or it's going to take a lot of effort to transmute this energy of fear. But the key thing he said here is that it's an energy, and therefore it's not subject to the human forms of time or space. So instead of thinking of this as a process that takes a lot of time and effort and could possibly fail because you might never reach the destination you desire, which is the transmutation of fear into excitement and then into enthusiasm, you realize that the excitement and the enthusiasm are already there simultaneously with the fear, because they're just different frequencies of the same energy. They're all just different choices that you have in front of you at the same time. So we've talked about this before too. Think about the physical manifestation of fear in your body. Okay, your heart rate increases. You might feel butterflies in your stomach. Your hands might start to sweat. Your senses are heightened, and you get very alert and aware of your surroundings. Seen from a different perspective, those are the same physical manifestations as excitement. So what he's saying is you can choose which label you want to give these physical manifestations. Okay, you can label them fear, or you can label them excitement. The label you give it is the form it takes, but what's inside of the core is the same energy. So when you see it this way, it's not like a place you need to go, a destination that takes a certain amount of time and effort to get to. It's more like just standing in front of a buffet and choosing what you want to eat. It's like, I think I'm going to go into this frequency of this energy, which is excitement, rather than this frequency of the same energy over here, which is fear. So that's so much easier, right? Side note here, something else I have learned. The word enthusiasm comes from the word enthuse, which originally meant to channel the gods or to access the divinity that lives within us and that is us. So isn't that interesting? When we know we are divine, when we recognize the Christ Spirit, the Christ consciousness within us, then we understand that we are not our labels and we are not our forms. Going back to Andrew Martin's quote, the divine only ever makes one claim: I am. Anything added after that is temporary. And if everything is energy, then we get to choose what temporary label we put on it. Whatever we encounter, we need to remember that it's just energy. And as such, it can be transmuted. But that doesn't necessarily have to be a lengthy or arduous process. It's just a matter of what container we decide to put it in. We can choose for it to be fear, or we can choose for it to be excitement, a problem or an opportunity, a roadblock or a stepping stone, a failure or a valuable lesson. So I want to close today by going back to a teaching I did several years ago called "There is no path to happiness. Happiness is the path," which is a quote that I borrowed from Pastor Lonnie Holloway. I think that it will be the perfect way to wrap up this idea we've been exploring today, that everything is energy, because that's true. You are not on a path. The path just is. Everything is happening all at once from an energetic standpoint, and you can just stand still and choose what frequency you want to vibrate on or at any given time. So I'm going to read a piece by Michael Singer first from a book called The Untethered Soul about the path of unconditional happiness, and then go on to tell you another story about what can happen if we refuse to let go of our attachment to forms and containers. It is a much less desirable outcome than if we let them go. Michael Singer says, "The highest spiritual path is life itself. If you know how to live daily life, it all becomes a liberating experience. But first, you have to approach life properly. You have to approach it from the perspective of the I am. First, you have to realize that you really only have one choice in this life, and it's not your career, who you marry, or even the choice to seek God. People tend to burden themselves with so many choices, but in the end, you can throw it all away and just make one basic underlying decision. Do you want to be happy or not? It's really that simple. Once you make that choice, your path through life becomes totally clear. Most people don't dare give themselves that choice because they think that their happiness is not under their control. Some might say, well, of course I want to be happy, but my wife left me. In other words, they want to be happy, but they can't be happy if their wife leaves them. But that wasn't the question. The question very simply was, do you want to be happy or not? If you keep it that simple, you will see that it really is under your control. It's just what you have. It's just that you have a deep-seated set of preferences that gets in the way. If you are hungry enough, your food preferences fall by the wayside. It's the same with happiness. The question is simply, do you want to be happy? If the answer is really yes, then you must say it without qualifying it. So what he's saying here, which is what I've talked to you about before, look, you may dislike or not prefer a certain type of food, but if you're starving, you're going to eat it, okay? I think I would probably eat an onion if I had to, and I detest onions. But if you're hungry enough, you're gonna eat it. So the comparison he's making is if your desire to be happy is strong enough, then you're going to stop putting conditions on how it comes to you. Like, I can only be happy if. I can only be happy when. When you're starving, any food is good. When you really want to be happy, you will find a way. Okay, back to the book. What the question, do you want to be happy or not, really means is, do you want to be happy for the rest of your life from this point forward, regardless of what happens? If you say yes, it might happen that your wife leaves you, or your husband dies, or the stock market crashes and you lose all your money, or your car breaks down on a secluded highway at night. Those things, or things like them, might very well happen between now and the end of your life. But if you want to walk the highest spiritual path, then when you answer yes to that simple question, you must really mean it, with no ifs, ands, or buts. If you qualify your willingness to be and to stay happy by saying, I will be happy if this happens or if that doesn't happen, that's when your happiness is out of your control because you are attaching conditions to it, okay? You are putting it into a form or a container. And conditions will always be beyond your control. The bottom line is any condition you create only serves to limit your happiness. If you decide you want to be happy from now on for the rest of your life, your answer in the affirmative to the question, do you want to be happy, must be unconditional. This is truly a spiritual path, and it's a direct and sure path to awakening as could possibly exist, because once you decide you want to be unconditionally happy, something inevitably will happen that challenges your commitment to this. And this test of your commitment is exactly what stimulates your spiritual growth. Now, I want to stop right here and say this doesn't happen just with this one decision, the decision to be happy. It happens with any decision you make concerning your spiritual path. It could be a decision you make to unconditionally love people or to take a vow of celibacy or poverty. There are thousands of different paths people have chosen throughout history to be their spiritual path. That's also up to you. And this happens with each of those things. When you make an unconditional commitment or a vow to about anything, then it's going to be tested. Happiness just happens to be the path but it's that we're talking about today, but it is a universal principle. And the question always comes down to, what is the point at which you decide to break your vow? And that is always within your control. So in that regard, you can't say, well, my happiness is beyond my control because circumstances are sometimes beyond my control, which is true. But that's also why, if you're going to make this commitment, it can't be dependent upon circumstances, and you have to know that going in. So yes, once you make a commitment to be unconditionally happy and to use this as your spiritual path, then it will cause you to grow spiritually, because things will occur that will cause you to break that vow or that commitment that you made. And that's the work, deciding each and every time something challenges your commitment not to break it. But if you do break it, then you must make the decision not to wallow in your shame and guilt and unworthiness because you broke your vow, but get right back up on the horse and keep moving. As Michael Beckwith said, keep walking toward something better. All right, back to the book once again. The purpose of your life is to enjoy and learn from your experiences. You were not put on this earth just to suffer, and you're not helping anybody else by being miserable. Regardless of your philosophical beliefs, the fact is that you were born and you are eventually going to die. During the time in between, you get to choose whether or not you want to enjoy the experience. Events don't determine whether or not you're going to be happy. They're just events. They're just containers. They're just forms. You determine whether or not you're going to be happy. You determine which frequency you want to live in. This path will lead you to absolute transcendence, because any part of you that would put a condition on your happiness has to go. You have to rise above it. If you truly want to be unconditionally happy, you have to let go of the part of you that wants to create melodrama, okay? Or that part of you that wants to shut yourself away from your friends and family and focus only on the things that make you sad, which some of us tend to do sometimes. This is the part of you that thinks there's a reason not to be happy. As you let go of that part of yourself, you will awaken to the higher aspects of your being. In the end, enjoying all of life's experiences is the only rational thing to do. After all, you're sitting on a planet, spinning around in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Go ahead, take a look at that reality. You're floating in empty space in a universe that goes on forever. Since you're here, you might as well enjoy yourself. Things beyond your control that you might not prefer are going to happen. You are going to die at some point. But why shouldn't you be happy until then? You gain nothing by being bothered by life's events. Your being bothered changes nothing. You just suffer. There will always be things that bother you if you let them. But the choice to enjoy life anyway will lead you on your spiritual journey. Committing yourself to unconditional happiness, and as I said before, you could replace that word happiness with anything, with love, surrender, peace, whatever it is you're committing yourself to. Unconditional happiness or unconditional any of those things will teach you everything you need to know about yourself, about others, and about the nature of life. You will learn all about your mind, your heart, and your will. Okay, so if peace is what you decide, that you're not going to ever let anything disturb your peace, that's going to be tested. But you can still go back to, I have committed myself to be at peace no matter what. So how do you do this? Every time a part of you begins to be unhappy, let it go. Work with it. Use affirmations or do whatever you need to do to keep your heart open. If you are committed, nothing can stop you, no matter what happens. As difficult as it sounds, just enjoy life as it comes to you. What is the benefit of not doing this? In the end, if you stay happy no matter what, you win. Make that your goal. Or going back to what we learned from the Michael Beckwith piece, make this your choice. Next question, why it is you think it is necessary to be unhappy about something, okay? When something happens, ask yourself if you're really willing to give up on your commitment because of this thing. For instance, you're having a great day until someone cuts you off in traffic. It really upsets you in the moment, but do you stay upset for the rest of the day? Why? Okay? Dare to ask yourself the question, what good came of letting that ruin my day? There was no benefit. So someone cut me off. Let it go. Giving away your happiness for it is not worth it. If you really decide to let it go, even if it's a much bigger issue than this, you can. Spiritual practices are not an end in themselves. They only bear fruit when your commitment to them allows you to remain open and true to the path you have chosen, no matter what. So that's the end of the information from the book, The Untethered Soul. Okay, so let's talk for just a minute about happiness being your path and what fruit that can bear in your life by looking at a no matter what scenario for a minute and seeing how deciding to be happy can be a choice that's not dependent on your circumstances or on events that occur in your life. So he's made his transition now, but for years there was a pastor named Bob Gass who was part of our ministry who would come speak for us regularly. And I've told you this story before, but he was a great storyteller. He's from Ireland. And he had this great Irish accent. And one of the most memorable stories he ever told here is the story about the bear who was in the captivity, and he was in this cage for years and years and years, and all he could do was walk. He said, and this is the way he would always say it, he would say, and the bear would walk 12 steps forward and 12 steps back. He would always say it like that. So one day, for some reason, the zoo decided that they were going to return this bear to the wild. And they took him to one of the most beautiful national parks in the whole world where he had nothing but acres and acres and miles of open forest to explore. But the bear had spent so many years in that cage that even when he was free to go wherever he wanted, he still stayed within the invisible parameters of his old cage, and he would only walk 12 steps forward and 12 steps back. So, like we talked about earlier, holding on to that penny for dear life, when if you would just turn around and look and open your mind and stay open to possibilities, there's $20 billion sitting behind you. So what we have here are events occurring in the bear's life that were beyond his control, both his capture and his release. Those were both events in his life that he had no control over. But even when he was physically set free, in his mind, he was still imprisoned in that cage because that's what he was committed to, no matter what. That was the habit he had formed. That was the choice he kept making. And that was the fruit that his practice bore. Even though an event occurred that freed him, his commitment to a certain path that had then set his habit was still controlling his behavior. He could have and should have been deliriously happy roaming the wide expanse of that park, but the path he had chosen led him to remain forever in a prison of his own making. So, shift now to a completely different scenario, but one also involving a prison. Let's talk about the biblical story of Paul and Silas. So, an event occurred in their life, in their reality, that landed them in jail. So this, just like with the bear, was a circumstance beyond their control. They got put in jail. So what did we say just a few minutes ago? Things will occur in your life from time to time that you would prefer not to have happened. But when they do, that's when what your spiritual path has been, which has in turn created your habits, that's when that kicks in and starts bearing the fruit of what you have committed to no matter what. So the bear was in prison mentally, even though he was physically free. Paul and Silas were free and happy in their hearts and in their minds, regardless of the fact that they were physically in prison. So it was the absolute opposite. So they started singing, and at midnight, we all know the story, the locks fell off the cell doors, and an earthquake of sorts destroyed the jail, making them physically free once more again. And as Pastor Lonnie often says, get happy and see what happens. That's what Paul and Silas did. Even though, just like the bear was physically free, but still in prison in his mind, they were physically imprisoned, but even so, they were still mentally and spiritually free in their hearts and in their minds. So we've been taught the exact opposite of that. We've been taught that events and circumstances occur, and then as a result of that, we are either happy or unhappy, peaceful or not at peace, loving or withholding our love. But that's still looking for that path to happiness, as Pastor Lonnie says, which is nothing but an illusion. That is hanging on to the forms and containers that our ego has created. Once we realize happiness and choosing happiness, no matter what, is the path, then positive events will begin to occur. Then our practice will begin to bear fruit, and we can see that we can see in our physical reality, because what did we say at the beginning? Everything is energy. And if you get into that frequency of whatever it is you want, love, peace, happiness, your physical reality has no choice but to match that. So once we realize that everything is energy, our whole perspective shifts, and we are able to go up to that higher frequency. As above, so below. As within, so without. It happens within us first. And I want to end with a quote from the Eagles. Okay, remember the rock group, the Eagles? One of my favorite songs of theirs is, I think it's Take It Easy, but the line is that it says, so oftentimes it happens that we live our life in chains and we never even know we have the key. So that the key is that knowledge that everything is energy, and that the container we put around it or the label we put on it is always our choice. Amen? Amen. So Benny's going to help me sing this morning our final song, Blessed Always. If you want to stand with me, those of you who are here.
Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant that we rest in God and say Amen. Blessed always, blessed always, for the arms of God surround us. Let our joy be so triumphant, that we rest
in God and
say Amen.
I love you. Choose your path this week and stick with it no matter what.